Hello and welcome to Amphlett Reviews. Today we have an extra special video, double bill review for John Woo's legendary, kick-ass, brutal, gun-violent movies, Hard Boiled and The Killer. Two movies that I've seen recently from John Woo's kind of collection lineup. And how have I not seen these movies beforehand? I do not know. Why is not many people talking about these movies, especially The Killer, which is a very interesting Pacific movie that I want to talk about. I really want to get into kind of other Hong Kong movies. I've been going for Jackie Chan, the Jet Lis, and now I want to go through John Woo and his kind of collection lineup and all those movies that I have not seen that are actually quite hard to get access to, surprisingly, as well. This video is going to give you some thoughts and opinions, give you a bit of insight into what I think of the films from the wonderful world of John Woo. We're talking about Hard Boiled and The Killer. Before going to this double review, I really want to give a recommendation and a shout out to Hong Kong Appreciation Society, Will and the editor, who creates these really good, constructive, very helpful, useful videos, everything based on Hong Kong cinema, everything from 88 films to Hong Kong Rescue. They give good insight and good knowledge and good personal opinion on everything Hong Kong based, from Jackie Chan, Jet Li, etc. And they're kind of recommending some really fantastic films and titles from top 10 lists to kind of deep dive into Jackie Chan reviews. They're really good, some good knowledge and insights into everything Hong Kong cinema. They know a lot more than I do, and for someone who's a beginner like myself, who's recently got into Hong Kong movies a lot more recently over the quarantine period, this channel is really fantastic and really giving you some good useful information, some good tips into kind of which movies you would recommend or which ones you want to start with, and giving some good honest feedback on films that I weren't too sure about. Recently Will talked about Jet Li's The Master on his double vampire review, and that kind of sold my friend into buying the film in '88, and we both watched it and we had a fun time and it was really enjoyable to watch. Something that we were a bit unsure about and a bit iffy with. He seems to have a really good keen eye on what he enjoys, and very similar to kind of myself, so I really do appreciate your videos, my friend. Yeah, Hong Kong Appreciation Society, really fantastic channel, everything deep dive into Hong Kong cinema. Guys, go and check it out. So let's start off with John Woo's most notoriously known famous film, Hard Boiled. It's probably his best and his most liked. Now, Hard Boiled is a film that I've always known about for a very long time since a young kid. If anyone remembers playing the Stranglehold video game on the Xbox 360, you know, the game with the kind of the bullet time, very Matrix kind of style kind of video game, that's kind of my first introduction in terms of John Woo's kind of like Hard Boiled. I played that game on the 360, it was awesome, it was kick-ass, might still hold up, I don't know. But Hard Boiled is always something I've known about over the years, you know, through kind of like, you know, best top 10 action scenes of all time in terms of any movie from Hong Kong, American, whatever. The infamous scene with the hospital, you know, with the explosions and the body count and, you know, him having a baby involved, and you know, you hear snippets and clips and, you know, you hear this and that kind of thing. But recently I've sat down, I finally managed to watch it, but in a John Woo mood. I really wanted to check out all of his films, from the recent announcement from Hong Kong Rescue getting the bullet to the head, the new 4K transfer from a private collector. That's the point onwards I really wanted to check him out, and I kind of pushed myself, and I'm so glad I did, because Hard Boiled is really fun and really kick-ass. This is a really fun movie. I never doubted it for a second, to be honest. John Woo, kind of Hong Kong John Woo anyway, not the American version, which I'll talk about it briefly in a second. So far is really awesome, kick-ass, and he has such a good eye and a good sense of style in terms of the way he does his films, not just action. Now, I'll talk about the action just now, and I want to talk about the story and the characters a little bit, but let's get the obvious out of the way, the action. Oh my god, incredible, perfect, amazing. In the film, it's incredible. Sense of escalation, sense of build up in the film. Each action scene complements the other, and works in a sense with the characters and the story and everything that's building up. You know, it's not just a fantastic action set piece, it's also a good moment where the characters are at a point in that film. That fantastic opening scene with the restaurant, where our kind of main lead, our kind of main protagonist character, played by Yong Chung Fat, if I said his name correctly, sets the stage of the entire film really well. It really shows the kind of level of action he's willing to show and willing to do in terms of blood scripts, in terms of the sound, in terms of the way it's shot, edited, put together. Absolutely incredible. One of those sequences alone would have been enough for most movies kind of thing, but now he takes it to the next level. And the sense of escalation from that point onwards is absolutely incredible. You've got the fantastic warehouse sequence where he just kind of dives in. It's absolutely amazing, incredible. I love the blood scripts, I love the kind of practical element to it, and all leading up to a fantastic third act sequence with the hospital, which is absolutely insane. So much explosion, so much body count, so much destruction. You've got some fantastic set pieces throughout the entire film. You've got this fantastic one-shot sequence where kind of our two main characters are doing this non-stop kind of brutal brutality throughout the entire hallways, all leading into kind of an elevator, and then it kind of goes upwards and then they have to continue doing it to get for the bad guys. And it's a really impressive, really incredible shot, and the fact how much effort and time and amount of work he's put into these shots, and you know, from the kind of behind the scenes I looked at, John Woo really puts the stakes and really puts a lot of energy and time and effort into these kind of shots and make sure they're perfect to what needs to be done, what needs to be shown, and he's willing to put the actors through hell to do it as well. It's absolutely incredible, some of the behind the scenes stories I've read about some of these sequences, and the fact that even though you've got this incredible third act kind of structure, you wanted to do more, you wanted to blow up the entire hospital, which he wasn't allowed to do. Absolutely insane. Madman, it seems to be a generational cycle type thing. You know, one movie comes along like Hard Boiled, kind of changes the scope of action genre, or kind of martial arts or gunplay or gun violence in a sense, and another movie tries to escalate and push it beyond that. We're living in a modern time now of John Wick being the kind of the high kind of tier with kind of The Raid and Gangs of London, which is a recent series, is fantastic. But on top of all this amazing action, you've got this really interesting, dark, complex, deep kind of police story about crime and about opposite ends of the law, and how people are willing to go to get to what their version of justice is. And it's very interesting ideas in this film, and very similar to the Killer as well. You've got our main kind of protagonist character played by Amphlett, which is a very kind of brutal, very kind of no nonsense kind of cop who wants to take out these triads, who wants to take out these kind of criminals, and he's going to kind of extreme lengths to kind of do it and make sure he gets it done. He doesn't want to see criminals on the streets anymore, and he's kind of a no-nonsense kind of cop, and he's doing some really fantastic stuff in this film to really get shit done. On top of that, a kind of personal story about revenge as well during the opening sequence, which I won't get too much into, but something happens which kind of fuels him to get into the gangs and the triads more, and he really is going for it, trust me, in this film. On the opposite side, you've got a really interesting character that is kind of deep undercover, very similar to kind of like The Raid 2 in a sense, someone who has been undercover for 5 years plus, who's doing things or has done things in the film that are very controversial, that are very kind of shocking, and is he going beyond that line kind of thing? Is he going too far in the film to kind of get what his version of justice is? And you kind of got those kind of conflicts kind of bashing back and forth throughout the whole film, and obviously you've got our main kind of protagonist who wants to take this guy down, who wants to kind of take all of them down, and he's doing the opposite. He's doing the same thing from an opposite side, and he's getting annoyed about our main kind of protagonist because he's getting in the way. The one thing you notice about John Woo movies is the dual narrative. There's always something that you will find in all of his movies, most of his movies anyway. This one and The Killer especially, and even Face Off, is the idea of yin and yang, the kind of dual personality, someone who is operating on opposite sides, who has the same goal but doing it in different methods. And both these characters are very similar in the sense of where they want to get justice and where they want to take out the bad guys in the sense of the film. And obviously they're opposite ends, and then they eventually kind of team up and eventually kind of take on the main bad guy together. And this is something that I think very interesting that happens in this film, The Killer, and you could say Face Off, which makes it kind of an interesting kind of triple bill kind of evening if you wanted to watch it. John Woo has a very clear sense of what he wants to talk about with his movies and these kind of themes, and deep diving into kind of character, kind of motivations and their kind of personalities and how it comes forth in the story naturally. And you find out a lot about these characters a lot more throughout the film, and you spend time with each one, and in terms of the bigger picture, the bigger story, in terms of our kind of main villains, and it makes for a really interesting, riveting kind of storyline. And that's what makes both these films actually quite interesting in terms of the dual narrative, in terms of two characters that have a sense of their own kind of right and wrong, in terms of the line, in terms of the limit they're willing to push to get results done. And they crash throughout the entire film, and it makes an interesting kind of narrative back and forth in terms of who's right and who's wrong. And the film also tests that with other characters. You've got kind of other side characters as well, with other kind of minion characters that also do the same thing. You've got innocent bystanders or kind of collateral damage throughout the entire film. There's a point in the film where a character doesn't kill the civilians because they are innocent bystanders, but our main kind of true bad guy mows them all down in 2 seconds, and even he's like, what the hell? You know, the film's constantly testing what is your limit, what is your breaking point, what is the line you are not willing to cross, and even our kind of, you know, sub-villain characters even have that dilemma, which I think is really interesting, really fantastic. On top of great action, on top of riveting, interesting characters, you've got a fantastic visual style. His camera work, his music, all gels all together. It feels very 80s, but not in the bad way that you would expect, like a very, not cheesy 80s, but also just stylistically 80s, really interesting with wide shots. You can see all the action, you can see all the kind of the big epic moments in the film, even the landscape of the film, the way the film is shot, the way the film is edited together and pieced together, on top of that fantastic music soundtrack, kind of very jazzy, dreamlike in a sense. It's really impressive, it's really amazing to watch, and Hard Boiled would be one of those films you'd be recommended over and over again on various kind of sites, but it's not easy access to get, it's not available on streaming services, there's only a DVD in the UK, there's a very hard to get Blu-ray you can get from Hong Kong. It's a very specific film. Unless you know about it, unless you're driven to go around and watch it, it's not something you're going to go out your way. But I implore you, I recommend you to go and watch it and go and experience this film for yourself. It is seriously kick-ass, it is seriously awesome to watch. It is John Woo's best film, Hong Kong best film. There is a Hong Kong rescue Blu-ray release of this film as well. It's called the Ultimate Edition, which features all the extras and the kind of up-to-date Blu-ray. Really recommend checking that out. I'm going to be purchasing that one soon because I recently watched the DVD and I need to see this on Blu-ray for sure. Hard Boiled. Go and check it out, guys.
The Killer, a thriller comedy that will leave you breathless.
And next up, guys, we have is John Woo's The Killer, the film he did before Hard Boiled, and believe me, this one, it's a doozy. It's a very unique, very special film for him in terms of a director, in terms of showcasing his kind of talent, in terms of, you know, style, in terms of music, in terms of editing, and kind of piecing this film together. His sense of action, his sense of kind of scope in terms of the way he kind of wanted to do this film. You know, there's a lot of kind of back and forth story in terms of how this film got made, in terms of the script, how he had back and forth arguments with a certain director, you know, in terms of guerrilla style, how he filmed certain sequences. This is a film that had a lot of issues getting on the way in terms of the script, in terms of location and filming, and he managed to craft a very unique, very special film with Yung Chung-fat, which was kind of the rising star at the time, who wanted to kind of challenge kind of Hong Kong cinema's kind of audience and do a very, very brutal, very nasty film about a contract killer who is kind of, you know, he's top of his game, he's a professional, a kind of civilian gets in the crossfire, gets collateral damage, and he wants to retire, he wants out, he is done, he has had enough. On the episode that she wrote this very brutal, very kind of hard-hitting kind of justice kind of cop who is almost kind of vigilante style, going after kind of criminals. He doesn't care about the civilian life, he doesn't care about the collateral damage as long as he gets the criminal. He's tired of the justice system, he's someone who's working in the system, who is willing to just use it for the meantime to get what he wants. And this is a very interesting kind of cat and mouse throughout the entire film. So very interesting. Again, very similar to kind of like Hard Boiled, his previous movies. A very yin and yang kind of story. They've kind of dual narrative. Someone who is a contract killer wants to retire, someone who's a cop who wants to take out this guy. And back and forth the film goes between these two characters. So let's talk about the action of the film. Let's get the elephant out of the room. The action is really interesting. It's very guerrilla style. It's very kind of on the fly. You can tell, and that's kind of the way the film was done in a sense, but it's very interesting. I really like the style of the film. You can tell this is a good kind of base ground for what he was going to do with Hard Boiled later on, and it's really incredible. I think the opening sequence action moments where he's taking out the contract kill sets the mood, sets the tone of the entire film. There's some very kind of close quarter, kind of claustrophobic kind of sequences where he's in a chair and he's kind of whipping out guns, and you've got the classic kind of blood scripts, you've got kind of this on the fly, on the move, kind of random sense of kind of action. He's taking out bad guys left, right and centre, shows how good he is. The film's action complements the characters very well in terms of how they use firearms, in terms of how they approach kind of, you know, them killing people in the sense. I think by the nature of the story and how dark the film is, I think the action and the actual violence is a lot more brutal. There's a lot more scenes where, you know, blood is coming out a lot more nastily in terms of their necks and headshots and kind of, you know, how certain weapons are used kind of thing. All the action scenes are a good sense of the character and their motivation and who all their kind of skill sets is. The escalation really builds up throughout the entire film. I think he definitely gets better as the film goes along, all leading to a fantastic grand kind of finale sequence within the church, which you've seen the poster for, you might have seen clips for. Another film that's probably in the top 10 list of action films of all time. The church is really incredible, it's really kick-ass, really grand in terms of the amount of extras, the amount of people they have to kind of take on, you know, our two main lead characters, which is absolutely incredible. The amount of violence and backflips and crazy reloads and, you know, sense of, you know, escalation and build up and, you know, high stake moments. Once again, on top of amazing action sequences that speak volumes, that are absolutely incredible, you need to go ahead and watch it yourself. I could talk about it for hours. You've got this amazing, really personal, dark, kind of complex story, which I really like. It's something quite different from Hard Boiled. You know, I think our main kind of protagonist character, this kind of contract killer, is very interesting. You find out more about him throughout the film. You find out his kind of code, his kind of sense of kind of professionalism in terms of the way he kind of goes about contracts, and you know how he kind of feels guilty about this kind of collateral damage. He's, you know, he's responsible for this character in this film for potentially going blind, and she's gradually losing her sight throughout the film, and he feels guilty for that, and he feels responsible, and he tries his best to kind of befriend her and, you know, form a connection with her. And his kind of personal character journey in the film, I think, is really unique, and especially towards what happens in the middle and the third act especially, I think is one of the most interesting kind of aspects of the film. It's not a very clear-cut kind of dry film in terms of the way you kind of expect a typical movie to handle this. This film is very surprising the way he handles this character, and way he kind of deals with the guilt and the kind of trauma of, you know, an innocent being, you know, affected by his actions. You know, changes his kind of motivation, changes his kind of style for the film, because he's very professional, he's very kind of quick on his toes in the sense, he knows how to use a weapon, and this film kind of deals with a weakness in a sense, and the strength in another way. And on the opposite side of this, you've got this very ruthless kind of cop who wants to take out criminals, who wants to take out the bad guys, who knows about this contract killer, who's understood who he is, and you know, his kind of dealings with the kind of kills he's done recently. At first, you're not sure whether you should like him, whether you kind of who you're rooting for in the sense. You're rooting for the killer, you're rooting for this you know, ruthless cop. Throughout the film, you understand both characters' kind of point of view and why they're doing what they need to do, and kind of, you know, the middle ground they're willing to get at. And there's some really fantastic sequences in the film where they kind of interact with each other, and they're just as good as each other essentially. They kind of a very good standoff. There's got this really fantastic sequence in the film that's very comedic and adds a lot of depth and a lot of layers to both the characters, where both of them have got guns to each other. You know, they're in the apartment of the woman that basically our kind of main protagonist is kind of seeing in a sense, who kind of wants to kind of help, and you know, the cop who's also there to kind of take advantage of this woman as well. And they're kind of doing back and forth dialogue, they're kind of taking the piss out of each other in a sense, they're kind of creating nicknames and saying they're best friends, and calls him shrimp head. And you know, it's a very good comedic kind of funny scene that works really well and kind of adds a bit of light kind of fluff to the film, which I think is interesting how their relationship develops throughout the entire film. You're never sure where it's going to go, you're never sure who to kind of side with in a sense, and obviously things escalate during the film as they usually would. Our kind of main villain group kind of wants to take out both, and the film has a really deep message about kind of like collateral damage and kind of innocent civilians being in the crossfire of these kind of grand kind of action sequences. While it's all cool and all that, you've got this kind of really gut-wrenching sequence involving a little girl, which is kind of really shocking and heartbreaking and really intense in terms of the way the film adds stakes to the film and where anyone can be potentially hurt in the process. And the film deals with that kind of the idea of that grief and kind of fate, and how what comes around gets around in a sense, and that kind of really plays into kind of both characters. You know, you've kind of got our kind of main cop character that has had a civilian being killed by his taking out a bad guy in a sense, and he has little remorse and little care about kind of, you know, the bystander. And you've got our contract killer that really cares about our kind of like bystander who's been affected by this, who's potentially. And throughout that, you've got some really great sequences and great moments throughout the entire film that really highlight a lot of these moments. Various characters do die in the film or do get in the way of in terms of, you know, what happens to our main character. One of the most surprising, most interesting supporting characters I've seen in a very long time in this film is the gun handler, the guy they use kind of like, you know, the middleman between the kind of contract killer and the kind of our kind of mafia kind of, you know, Yakuza kind of gang, who is an ex kind of special, you know, contract killer himself, who is injured, who's kind of lost the edge, who's got a scar on his kind of hand, and who can't do it anymore, and he can't handle a weapon properly. And he's a bit of a lapdog, he's a bit of a pushover, and he's kind of someone who's kind of lost his way, who's kind of lost kind of that edge in the sense of that game, and he's kind of the friend of our contract killer, and you know, he kind of betrays him and he lets him live. And there's some good moments and good dialogue, back and forth exchanges between those two characters, and he has a really fantastic arc in the film. I won't say too much what happens in it, but it surprised me. I was not expecting the sense of character and journey and, you know, completion this character has, but he has a really good kick-ass moments in the film and has some really good moments I was not expecting to see. And it really, once again, lays the groundwork, lays the stakes for kind of, again, innocent bystanders, innocent people in the way of these kind of two main characters that are creating so much destruction between them two. And so that's been my double review for John Woo's Hard Boiled and The Killer, two very different type of action films, both offering a lot of entertainment, offering a lot of interesting characters and interesting drama and high stake moments. Action sequences are fantastic, amazing, both very brutal in terms of its violence, and both offering something different in terms of its kind of message and its drama and its character motivations, and one being a lot more darker and grounded and a lot more kind of guerrilla and its kind of nature in terms about kind of collateral damage and human nature and how we kind of deal with that kind of collateral loss, and one being a more traditional grand epic scale kind of action movie, both offering a lot to like and ones that I would highly recommend. Hard Boiled and The Killer, highly recommend it, guys. If you've not seen these movies, really go check them out. They are fantastic, and I look forward to seeing your guys' thoughts and opinions in the comments down below for it. Next two films in John Woo's collection is Bullet to the Head and Once Upon a Thief, two films I've not seen yet, and I'm really looking forward to checking these films out. I've heard some really good things about both films, one being a very early film in his career and one being a slightly later, more action comedy based film, I believe. If you guys have seen these films, let me know, comment down below. If you want to see my thoughts and opinions, my reviews on these, please comment down below as well for both these. So there you go, guys, that's been my double review for Hard Boiled and The Killer. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope it's been insightful and helpful. I look forward to doing more videos based on Hong Kong cinema soon, so please comment down below. And until next time, guys, this is Amphlett Reviews, signing out.